Recreation Commission. There you are. I can't even see you back there. Catherine, would you like to call the roll?
Stacy Ashland.
Here.
Deidre Cromie. Here. Jennifer Hedderly.
Here.
Ed Lowing.
Here.
Abby Knopper.
Here.
Pat Markovich.
Here.
Keith Rechtel.
Here.
Greg Schmid.
Do we have any changes to the agenda, requests for deletions from commissioners? I'd like to make one change then. Item number 3, the draft urban forest master plan, we're going to change to a discussion instead of an action. And we can take oral comments, but I don't think we have any public here to do that. So why don't we go ahead and start with business, approval of draft minutes from the February 25th, 2014 meeting. Does anybody have changes or corrections to the minutes? Oh, we're cruising along. Minutes? I have a couple changes then. On page 11, line 451, the second sentence says the target audiences for city residents, including current, should be the stated target audiences for city residents include current and potential park users. Do you have that? And then on page 13, line 527, meetings for the general public, asking them to help us, then insert by saying what they want. And the next sentence, delete if, and change that W to capital We. Only have one where you miss it, you're done, comma, and then insert for the public to see the draft of where we've taken that information, period, and then start new sentence with it. Oh, and one other on that page, line 502. It should be distribution and then put in a colon, and delete of, and insert for example, comma. And then it continues, this facility has a majority of, and insert users in this age group. I'm on line 502. It starts with distribution. Put a colon after distribution, delete of, and insert for example, comma. And then later on in that line, after majority of, insert users in. And that's it for me. And I didn't see any other edits to the minutes. Okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'm just going to change special, it's me right here, to regular meeting because that got carried over from the previous.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. Now, on our second item of business is discuss the March 24th study session with council. This is really loud. Does it sound like I'm yelling out there? With council on the Palo Alto Parks Recreation Open Space and Trails Master Plan. And I don't know if there's a staff presentation on this or we should just dive right into it.
Well, yeah, it's not really a staff presentation. It's mostly a debrief, I think, from what we heard last night and what council said. It was a bit of a change in how the commission was going to be seated, so I thought that was a little bit awkward on the end, having all you guys up there and then not really an opportunity to say anything. But I think council's intent was to try and make it more participatory, to have you up there instead of in the audience. And, you know, in retrospect, really would have been better to have more time, an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, so there could have been comments and questions from from all of you guys. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. But it was good to hear council's perspective and each of them to provide that to us as we start this work. So I just wanted to say that. Peter, did you want to say anything?
Good evening, Commissioners. I think as in respect to what was said by council yesterday in the study session, that it was an opportunity for you to basically kind of hear where their interests were and where they wanted to focus on in that, which I think as we start to review this in this room together, that you can reflect back on what they said, because it's going to get to them in the end. So if there were specific things that they said last night that you thought were good comments that should be things that you felt may not be relevant to the plan, those are things that we can discuss now and further and get further input on, or so we can open up a conversation about that, of what we heard last night, or if there was comments from about last night of what was discussed, then or further questions, then we can take those as well. So,
Commissioner Markovich?
Well, the one that Councilmember Holman, where she said, we should make this 100 years out. And while that's ambitious, it's unrealistic, because who knows what this town's even going to look like then, and I wouldn't want us to try to hold to something that far out. I like the time checks that we have that are in the current draft.
and I will respond to that. I did briefly speak with Lauren Schmidt after the presentation. We touched on that a little bit. Definitely for some aspects of it, talking about specific facilities to construct and specific projects that, yes, 50 to 100 years out is a little far for a master plan like this, but it should, though, set up our general goals and what we would expect our park system to be in 50 to 100 years, and it can address kind of those overall broad general ideas, broader perspectives of how we feel it should be developed and maintained over time. So there can be an aspect of that in there that looks past the 25 years of kind of these harder facts and proposed projects and renovations that we have now, to more address just our general feeling of how we want to keep our park system, recreation system in the future. So,
Commissioner Lowing?
Just a couple comments, and glad you raised that. I do think it's a good vision that Councilmember Holman raised there, because we could do things that cut off options in the 50-year time frame. So as you're doing this, that sort of forward-looking option pretty much is what you said, is to say, but maybe more specific, like 50 years from now, we probably do need more parkland, so let's start putting away our pennies because the demographics are going to push us in that direction, and we need whatever it is. So that kind of thing, I think, is very well intentioned, and we should be taking a look at that. She also raised the point, which I happen to agree with, is that I don't think we should spend a lot of time on Stanford and things like that. I mean, there's just so many things that we can control, and we don't control Stanford. So, to the extent that there's partnerships there, that's great, but I don't think we can count on that ever. So that seems to be a little bit out of the scope of what you're intending here. And then thirdly, as our liaison noted, they'd like to see more frequent updates at council. I think we would all welcome that, because then we would get ongoing input to make sure that our input to them is being received and processed and fed back.
Yes, and I would agree with that. I think specifically the schedule reflects the times that the consultant is going to be available basically to us, but that doesn't mean that we can't have more periodic updates going on with staff basically involved doing that at meetings. I think that'll also have more reporting as well when the ad hoc commissions get going, because they'll be reporting back basically at the meetings of what's going on with that development. So I would suspect that probably every meeting from here all out will have some type of review of what's going on in the process. So.
I thought it was a great presentation last night. Obviously, we had gone through it before, but I thought it was overall pretty well received. The one comment that I thought about and wasn't so sure was Councilman Klein's comment about integrating the school facilities into the whole park situation. And I wasn't sure whether that's really relevant because it is, or how we would even, or you would even be able to approach that, because they are technically school facilities. And so I could tell that there were a few other council members that probably disagreed with that, at least the two that I was sitting next to. So I wanted to say that. And one of the comments by Council Member Burt about the integration of, or at least thinking about seniors and children having to walk or cross large roads and treacherous territories. I think a lot of the issues that they brought up are just going to automatically be resolved when the research and the due diligence comes back. So I think these are things that they're thinking about, and it's like their personal feelings, but about what's important to them. But I have a feeling, since nothing has really been done since 1965, which is a really long time ago, that a lot of this is just going to be natural information that's going to come to them. And I think a lot of this will be resolved as soon as the data starts flowing. The one last thing that I really liked, because I don't know why I didn't pay attention to this earlier, was that I think you say PETA, the interactive mapping, and I thought that would be a great tool for us too, for our website, which we can talk about at another point, or some sort of feature where you have that interactivity with specific data points on a map. And because they had a large map in front of them that with all the little parks, and I was just imagining if you could just hit the little button and that pops up what facilities are there and how many picnic tables and all of the information. It would be, you're all like laughing at me. But I think that would be a really great, and we're thinking about our interactive website, something. I'm done now.
Can I make a comment on
Oh, yes, go ahead, Rob.
just the school? I thought it was interesting, too, the comment about the school district from Councilmember Klein, because while we don't have control over the school district sites in terms of rebuilding them or that type of thing, we do use the school sites a lot, particularly the parks, the field spaces, and they're used heavily for instance, off-leash dog, activity and that kind of thing. So I do think that it's important that we do work closely with the school district in thinking about how the public uses their facilities, whether it's gym space or field space. And we met with them today, although I wasn't at the meeting. So I think that's what Councilman McCline was sort of more getting at, is the public use of those sites is pretty heavy.
I just add to that, the other piece of it is that because there's so much community use of those sites, that's a big chunk of how we serve our needs. So in our needs assessment, we want to be able to reflect that presumably we'll continue to be able to use those facilities, and we hope to and we need to, but we don't want to leave them out of the equation altogether because they are part of our network, but I don't think we need to plan for their development in the future.
Can I say, I'm sorry, one last thing. The Rinconada debunked refreshment stand, that's not the first time I've heard about that. So I don't know if this is the time or this is the project to think about for-profit refreshment stands in our parks. New York City's done a really terrific job of the Shake Shack, for instance, was placed in the middle of a debunked park in New York City, and now it's one of the most popular parks in Manhattan. And so I don't know if this is the time to maybe think about, well, if this is really a need in the community or something that keeps coming up and people are like, yes, we want something like this in one of our larger parks, something to think about.
And to add to that, I guess in conjunction with the overall master plan, we actually, and this is a project that I was hoping to be completed by now, but it's not and should be very soon, but we have been working on the Rinconada Long Range Plan. And definitely that was one of the main things that kept coming up in community meetings over and over again, was this snack shack that used to be there, and how it was beloved by the people that remember it being there. So that is an aspect of the long range plan. It is recommended to bring that back and actually build a facility next to where it used to be that's more up to date, that can do a little bit more than just what was done before with the hamburgers and kind of the junk food area. So yes, we've already started looking at that, and that is definitely something that's going to be planned to bring back to Rinconada Park. So.
Did you have
Although there was some disagreement from the council last night about whether to include all the school sites or not, I thought it was a good point about the term was shared ownership and therefore shared use, and that was definitely valid. So it might not have to be an all or nothing situation, but if the master plan does dive into that, certainly Terman qualifies as both city and school. So that made a lot of sense. The other thing that came up from Lauren Schmidt from MIG right at the very beginning, since so much of the master plan is focused on community feedback, is she mentioned that all the social media channels online were already in place and we would be using existing channels. And there is one for recreation services and there is one for open space, but on Facebook and Twitter, there's nothing for parks. So we really need to get it in place. And I know that it's a lot of staff effort to maintain a third account. It could easily be Parks and Rec or Parks and Open Space and combining with one of those two accounts probably, instead of starting a third one. But I just wanted to be clear that wasn't in place for parks, and we're relying on a lot of feedback, so I wanted to make sure we were able to get that.
I just wanted to acknowledge that comment. I'll follow up with open space. I think it's a logical one to join that with parks.
Thanks. Commissioner Kwame?
Yes, I'm glad that several of the council members brought up the idea that walking in parks is not the same thing, so that where there's a deficit of parks per density of population, it doesn't really suffice just to say, well, we can have some walking trails nearby. And so I think that our comprehensive plan specifies certain ratios of parkland to population, and I think that some of the council members might not have been completely clear on that. So I'm glad that it came up as a strong statement from council members Burt and Holman that, that idea of the half-mile rule should be taken seriously. And then I just wanted to echo what Stacey Ashland said about the relationship with Terman. I think that's a really interesting model. And I don't know I don't understand the origin of how the Terman field has that special status. I know that it's used a lot for soccer. And I think it actually is formally, can you explain, is that formally a park?
Yes, that was once school land. They sold it to the city, and then they opened the school back up. So the fields, the tennis court, and the basketball court are all city-owned. And then when the school opened up back, they formed an agreement that allows the school to use it during school hours. That's the fields, the tennis court, and the basketball court. And then when school's over, it's open to the public and on weekends.
So is that something, well, maybe you can come back to us, and I don't know if that's any kind of model that can be used. I guess that was just a unique situation. Also, I just want to make sure that there's a little confusion over this master plan scope when it comes to open space, and how much of the open space are we really considering within this master plan, and when I first looked at the scope, it looked to me like it was just built-out areas in open space. So what I would take that to mean would be, like, for instance, at Arostadero Preserve, there's that new kind of nature educational center. So I assume we're looking at that. And I hope, does it cover also the Lucy Evans Nature Center? So things like that. So I know we're going to probably discuss this later on the topic of the potential, the new park dedication. There's some, we just need to sort of get some clarification on how much of this master plan will really look at the open space areas that don't pertain to something that's already built, like just vision for the open space areas. So I'm even confused if that's within the scope of this plan. In some ways, I like that the scope was defined as built-out areas, because sometimes these master plans, I feel, can almost become a development plan. They like hinge on that, and so I don't think we have the mandate to go in and develop open space as a product of this plan. So I'd hate to kind of get into that, but I think it's this envisioning of the open space, maybe, if I were to put it that way. And like it comes up when we talk about trail connectivity. Clearly, that's a vision for, if you talk about trails in open space, that is a vision for a kind of development into an open space. So as staff members, where do you stand on that definition of the scope?
I think that's a really good question. I understand it's the developed areas, and so that's all the trails and all the facilities in our open space properties and the roads and that type of thing. But the visioning of potentially extending a trail, for instance, into an area that's not developed, is that part of this or not? And I actually don't have the answer to that. I think it's a really good question, though. I don't know if the gentleman here.
I can check in a little bit. It is an excellent question, and I think part of the answer lies in you'll weaken the master plan if you ask it to delve too deeply into trails and all of open space. We already have a trails plan for Arostadero Preserve, very lengthy document, took a lot of time and effort to create it. I don't think you're going to gain the same level of detail, the great end product that you'd get by asking the Parks Master Plan that looks at everything to get so in depth into trails for open space. So I think it'd be asking too much to provide the same thing you got out of that Arostadero Trail plan, right? So it's some higher level view onto the trails in open space, and it wouldn't look, maybe it's easier almost to say what it wouldn't look at. It wouldn't look at what a conservation plan would look at. It's not going to look at depth into habitat. It's not going to look into wildlife. It's not going to look into natural resources. Those things would be beyond the scope in my mind. It'd be really looking along those main corridors where there's roads, where there's a interpretive center, where there's established picnic areas. Sites like that call out for, is this the right number of picnic tables? No, you've got way too many, or you've got too few, or you need more group ones. Those are the kind of things I envisioned when we asked them to look at it. I also heard you touch on the 7.7 acres. It's undeveloped right now, but it's in the, I always thought this would be a perfect thing to be analyzed by the Parks Master Plan. What should we do with it? And at our Parks Commission retreat, that came up. Do we form an ad hoc committee to come up with concepts ahead of time, or do we integrate with the Parks Master Plan? And at that point, we came to consensus that integrating with the Parks Master Plan was the way to go. Last night with the council, they deviated from that and said they'd like us to come, staff that is, with options to the commission. But there was also deference to the commission, saying they're the experts, I heard Council Member Berman say, and that they should be providing guidance. So part of this conversation, I think, is me asking you, how in depth do you want me to go in the options that we researched for that 7.7? You can get exhaustive with the options for that area. Really, there's no end to the different things you could put on them. Some of them would be multi-millions. I've heard concepts of picking up and moving the entire maintenance operation and moving it back to the area so you'd have a contiguous Los Trampas connectivity. Several millions, maybe 10 million or more to do all that work. There's no utilities in the 7.7 acre. I guess what I'm asking is how in depth do you want me to look at that, these different scenarios? Do you want the ad hoc to meet with us independently before we come to the full commission with options? Do you want MIG to start looking at some of this? And where I was going with it last night, as I was jotting down thoughts, one concept was we could perhaps ask MIG for an interim plan. I know the council was not keen on waiting till there's a master plan complete and in the bag before we take any action. One concept is, sure, the Parks Master Plan will take 1.5 years, but there's no reason they couldn't come up with an interim solution that provides perhaps limited public access that doesn't mean building up everything, but still gets people into the area, gets it open. So anyways, I'm looking for a little insight into what the commission feels on that topic.
I just wanted to follow up on well, I want us to answer that question, Darren, so we're not going to forget that. And I also want to say, as you were talking about how we might look at open space as part of this Parks and Recreation Master Plan, one idea that came up during the interview process when we were hiring the consultant was that what's really important is to understand the value the community places on that. And so that can come up during surveying questions, for instance. So just that it's not invisible, because really what the Parks and Rec Master Plans is it's this community assessment, prioritization, community values. And so surely we'd want to inquire about that kind of thing. So I didn't want to lose that point. And then as far as direction to, on the question of the 7.7, I'll just let you handle that.
On that question, I think maybe we can try to gauge the level of ideas that commissioners have without going into detail about the ideas. If people have a lot to say about it, I think we should agendize it and have a full discussion. If people don't, then maybe we send it to an ad hoc to brainstorm about it.
And can we confirm, so we are clear as a commission that we're going to keep that as an active ad hoc on the 7.7 acres. Is this a time to get clarification on how that all works, or should we wait on that? Because we have a lot of direction, I feel. We have our own ad hoc. We still have our own ad hoc looking at that 7.7 acres. We have councils given staff direction to develop some ideas. Is staff going to develop their ideas along with our ad hoc committee, or is it going to be two separate processes?
Well, our ad hoc hasn't done anything yet. They were kind of lying in wait to see whether this was going to come to us. So now I think we can figure out how we want to set that. Pat, you're on the...
Yeah, it's
and Abby, you two are on the ad hoc?
Right. So I think that the best route to do at this point is to just meet with staff to get just a general sense and to see where they're at, because we have time. But I don't want to jump the gun too early on it. It's a beautiful piece of land and it should be given its due. So I think that it at least be Darren and Abby and myself to start with. And we do definitely welcome any comments from the other commissioners.
So maybe the ad hoc meets with staff to start framing some issues, and then we come back to the full commission for an agendized discussion to brainstorm further. Great. Other comments on last night?
I'm fine, thank you.
Commissioner Rectal.
Yeah, overall, I thought it was a good discussion last night. I do think that the sharing we mentioned earlier, the sharing between schools is very important. And I think it goes both ways. We can use the school's facilities after hours, and they can use our field, and I think we need to have more interaction. But there's also cases like cafeterias. You could use some of the school cafeterias for seniors after school hours or something like that. So there are things that we're not pursuing right now that down the road may be useful. Liz Niss had a comment about she thought the half mile was not very far. And for someone who's healthy, I think that's fine. But we have elderly seniors where a half mile is very significant. And also kids, when our kids had discovered trikes. They wanted to take their trike to the park, and if it was a mile, that would have been very hard for them. So I think keeping that distance short is a good rule. Pat Bird, I thought, had a very good point about distance isn't the same as conductivity. And that we just, was it approved with the council, the new bike boulevards, or is that still under work?
Yeah, I believe that's been approved.
Okay. Did Parks and Rec have any input into that? Did they made some
Very
effort
much
to
so,
link?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great, very helpful.
Because especially for the kids use bikes to go to parks, and that.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
that's where we came up with that idea of safe routes to parks. I think it came out of our work on that plan. And Bert, Councilmember Burt quoted that.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I think the Parks and Rec Commission has a real fingerprint on the bike pedestrian master plan. Very good.
That's all.
Okay. Then I will bring your attention to this front page of the packet on the master plan. And there's this one pager called, where the heading says Prost Master Plan Discussion. But first of all, I want to comment on last night's presentation. I thought the staff report was outstanding. I thought it was extremely thorough. It did a great job reflecting our input and also framing all the issues in an understandable way. So I don't know who wrote it, but I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, that's a kudo to Director Betts. Yeah, he did that. Yeah, I think he did an outstanding job too, and a great presentation also.
Yeah. So what I did here, since we have 6 commissioners breaking out over 3 different ad hocs over the next few months, I wanted to kind of have a handy one-pager so that we could use as a tool to make sure we're all working from the same playbook as we go forward. So what I included on here is the objectives for the master plan from the RFP, those first 6 items, and they kind of play out as how we're doing, where we're headed, and how to get there. And then I tried to put it in context of the rest of our work. And this heading for park priorities is issues that have been of continuing concern for us for quite some time. I'm sure I haven't captured all of them. In fact, I think maybe teens might be added to that, supply-demand issues. I threw public art on there. I recently met with the commissioner of the with the chair of the Public Arts Commission, and they are interested in pursuing a master plan for public art in the next year or 2 as well. So there may be ways to find efficiencies between the 2 processes and at least connect to each other. And then finally, tie-ins to other work, the cost of service study, our town values conversation, whatever our commission decides to do about public awareness efforts, the urban forest master plan, and the future planning for Cubberley. Those all, I think, what we learn from that work should all feed in and out of the master plan as well. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes looking at this and making sure that we have everything on it that the commission would like to have in the front of our minds as we branch out and start working on the master plan. Commissioner Long?
I just had one clarification question. What did you mean by passive park space versus active?
I mean, like an open field versus a playground. Quiet space versus active space was what I had in mind.
Okay, but it's still all dedicated park and,
Yeah.
okay.
An example of that is when we redid the section of Greer Park next to the skateboard facility. So that was sort of a pastoral is the word, pastoral park design versus all those playing fields nearby. And that was one reason the community really wanted that kind of design. But it also relates to even more pastoral experiences of just sitting on a bench.
Or similarly, the open space that we kind of pounded the table for in El Camino Park versus jammed-in fields.
Exactly.
That's what you mean? Okay.
Yeah. Any reactions to this or additions, changes?
I would like to add I have actually started working on today setting up the schedule for the ad hocs and how they'll function and the dates meeting and all those things. So I should have that to send. I'll send it to Rob and he'll send it out to you. So next week sometime so we can have that further information as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Kwame?
I wanted to, I don't know where to put it. I really appreciate you laying this out for us. How about this idea of a supply in the right location? Is there a way to get that captured under supply-demand issues?
Sure.
She listed it under appropriate balance of program services across user groups and the geographic.
Right, thank you, I did.
Thank you. That probably carries it.
Geographically.
That one bullet is pretty dense, that appropriate balance of programs. It covers everything. I mean, it's a good bullet, but we do so many things in recreation, after-school stuff, summer activities. You might want to call some of those out because recreation really is a broad, and sometimes that takes it takes a back seat to parks themselves. But the recreation is a very important part of Parks and Rec.
So what are you suggesting?
Talk about teen after-school activities, summer camps, senior activities. And those all currently are covered by that one bullet, but it is a little dense, and so it might be good to call those out just to be explicit about that.
So user group, balance of programs and services across user groups
Yeah, I think
based on age.
I think I'd leave that
interest.
bullet as is, and then do some sub-bullets, just like you did dog parks up there.
Okay.
And specify.
Oh, I see.
Specify
you mean.
senior activities, young kids activities, the preschool activities, that teens after school.
Demographic segments.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Yes, Commissioner Markovich.
Okay, the planning documents paragraph on, I guess it would be page 2. It discusses the Baylands Master Plan, the Comprehensive Plan, the Arastradero Preserve, the IBRIC report. I think when the final report comes out and it's electronic, it would be nice to provide links to others, such as the airport plan, because that is a form of recreation for some people, the GOT space or the field usage plans. Those types of things would be really useful to have linked to the report.
Is that it? All right. Then let's move on. Unless, staff, did you have anything else to cover? All right. That moves us to item number 3, review and recommend approval of the draft urban forest master plan. We're discussing it, right. We made that
Discussion
change.
item. We have urban forester Walter Passmore here to help with just a brief overview of where we're at.
Thank you, Commissioners. Walter Passmore, Urban Forester. Very quickly, just wanted to go over a few updates of where we've come since the last time we met with Commission on this subject. So we did some major updates to the development chapter as requested by the Planning and Transportation Commission, and we did some updates to our communication on ecosystem management with some specific mentions to wildlife as requested by the Parks and Recreation Commission. We came up with a February draft, which is currently posted on our website, and I believe you got a copy of that in your packet. The Planning and Transportation Commission approved that draft and asked that it be conveyed to Council. So it's important you understand that. Following that approval, we received some additional comments from Audubon, Native Plant Society, and Sierra Club, to mention a few of the constituents, asking for additional language to be added into goals, policies, and programs, so the action part of the master plan, that addressed open space and wildlife management specifically. We have started to incorporate those. We had a first draft, but since we prepared the draft, we've been asked to revise that again. So we're actively working on trying to incorporate those comments into a consensus-based edit of our Goals, Policies, and Programs chapter. We intend to come back to the Parks and Recreation Commission in April with the February draft plus an edited Goals, Policies, and Programs chapter. So any comments that you have regarding the master plan in general will be based on the February draft. I think we have established a good model for communication with our stakeholders with the golf course project, and I think that's where, you know, some of the expectation came on being able to incorporate these comments, and some of the faith from our stakeholders that we are going to do our best to get everything synthesized into the document that's being requested. We're not prepared to give that to you at this time because we're still actively working on edits with that stakeholder group, but that will be in your April packet. And just a final mention, we are planning to reference the Parks Master Plan and the open space plans that Darren mentioned, the Trails Master Plan and the Comprehensive Conservation Plans. Those were both items of discussion with our constituent group. So those will be references when we bring you back the edits to the Urban Forest Master Plan. And with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. So this will come back to us in April, and then we will, that'll be an action item in April because we're trying to move this along quickly to get to council as soon as possible. So tonight, why don't we go through any substantive concerns or comments about the draft that's before us, and we'll leave the goals, policy, and programs discussion for next month. Commissioner Markovich.
I noticed you have photos of 1982 and 2010 of various neighborhoods. Is it all of the neighborhoods?
No.
It doesn't look like it. So is it going to be either or? Are you doing it as a sample, or are you going to include all the neighborhoods?
It's a sample based on a canopy analysis that was done by UC Davis. So we just pulled out, I think, some of the more dramatic comparisons.
Okay, thanks.
This is an amazing report in that there's a lot of data in it. It's very good, very complete. I think the data is very helpful, but also kind of works against you in that it gets overwhelming. You can get lost in it, and it makes it very difficult to get to the point if someone, council, probably will not read through the whole thing. They have a lot of reports to read. So I think you really should do is spend 4 or 5 pages up front, do an executive summary and say, these are the conclusions that are most important out of this report. And it's the elevator pitch. Just summarize it into a very short package that anyone can pick up and read in a couple minutes and get the gist of what you're going at. And then at that point, you've done 2 things. You've informed the people who aren't going to read the whole report, and the people who are going to read the whole report, they'll have a better understanding. They'll know where you're going, and they'll be able to follow instead of just wandering through the wilderness. So I think that would be it'd be well served to have some type of executive summary up front. But also in the report, there's a lot of times where there's data listed, and I'm not sure exactly why. Rob, can you pull up the report at all, or is it convenient?
I'm not sure. Is it online?
Mm-hmm.
Might want to keep asking your questions because it might take you a moment.
Okay. So in the report on pages 42, 43, 44, they have these pictures showing the before and after of the various neighborhoods. And almost all of them were losing trees. And I found that very interesting. It's a good thing to have in there. I don't know the conclusion of that. Is it, well, that's life, or is that we can do something to change that? And so I don't know what the context of why is it important, or why do we have all these pages saying how we're losing trees? Are we trying to reverse that? Are we trying to just inform people that our trees in Palo Alto are doomed?
Actually, a lot of the pictures are showing increases in trees.
Well, a few of them were, but most of them were decreasing. I mean, if you look at 44, you're decreasing. You look on 45, there are spots where there was development and what used to be an empty lot has now been landscaped. But also, a lot of the old trees in our neighborhood have gotten mature and been cut down and haven't been replaced, and that may happen with the landscape also. So that trend, even though temporarily the new landscaping may make it appear that we have more trees, that isn't necessarily given that that will stay long term. So that, again, my point is, why are we showing these pictures? Are we stating this is just a trend, or are we saying this is a trend that we're going to try to reverse? And if we are going to try to reverse it, what actions are we taking to reverse it? So what was the purpose of putting that in there? Was it to say that we need to reverse this, or was it to just say that we are losing trees?
The pictures show the influences of development primarily, and what the table on page 48 shows is that we've actually increased net canopy during that time frame between 1982 and 2010. So you can see there's some different slices of the city called out, but in all of those, canopy is actually increased over that time period. And then in the goals, policies, and programs section, we call out that we want to have a goal of no net loss of canopy. So we feel like we're at a good spot right now, and we want to be able to mitigate against the loss of further canopy and replace the trees that we're losing. You know, not necessarily a tree everywhere that there was one before, but strategically thinking right tree in the right place down the road so that we maintain the same level of service from our urban forests that we have now, or even enhance that.
I mean, that was a really good explanation, and I wish that was in the report, because that would make the report much more usable, much more complete. Because again, we're seeing a lot of data, and maybe to someone who's a tree expert, the conclusions are obvious, but to someone who's just a layman reading through here, it gets overwhelming with all this data. What's the conclusion that I'm supposed to draw from this? And another example of that was, like on page 55, where we have the list of the trees. We have two tables there. One of them native species by habitat, and the other street tree population species. And what's the conclusion? Why are these charts in there? What should I, when I'm reading through here and I see this, is this good news or bad news? Is this, if I look over southern magnolia, is the #1 tree, street tree population by species. Is that a good tree? Is that a bad tree? Is that, like some of these, liquid amber, I understand is not a good one.
Right now it's just data. The beginning part of the Urban Forest Master Plan is about assessing where we've come from, what's the history, where we are now, and then the second part of the Urban Forest Master Plan is about what are our current issues, and then in goals, policies, and programs is our future visioning. What are the actions that we need to take to get where we want to go? And so this initial data just kind of frames where we've been. So when you look at the species tables, you can draw a lot of conclusions from those. You can say we don't have a very high population of native species. You can also say, but we have a very broad diversity of species as a whole. We can also look at it and compare to other communities and say, you know, there's some general rules about how much of one species or one genus should be dominant in the ecosystem. And general rule is you don't want any one species to make up any more than 20% of your population, any one genus to make up, or I'm sorry, any one species more than 10, any one genus to make up more than 20. So obviously southern magnolia is a little bit over the 10% rule for a species, but there's very few other magnolias, so it's under the 20% rule for a genus, and we have no other species that are exceeding 10%. So our diversity is pretty healthy. We are buffered against the advent of large-scale insect or disease outbreaks, and the population is fairly resilient in that way. But you can also look at the natives and say, wow, we really don't have very many natives, so in the future, maybe we should encourage more native trees to be planted where we have the right space for those.
Again, that's a really good explanation. I wish that was in here too, because that would add to that. So when I'm looking at these charts with all this data, having some context for that data would be wonderful. Because what you just said makes this data much more usable to me. And same thing if we look at page 29, where we have these various trees and then their costs and benefits. Again, I can kind of look at this as a layperson, compare different numbers, but someone who's a tree expert is going to give me a much better insight in this on page 29 I'm talking about. And so, boom, we have a whole bunch of data. And this is interesting data, but when I look through the different columns and compare numbers, I'm not sure if I'm making the right conclusions. And it would be very helpful to have the insight put in there so people who are not tree experts can understand what the point is. And the next page on 31, this was, again, a really good chart. I like all the data comparing Palo Alto to various other cities around the U.S. And you can look at some of these columns and as a layperson figure out, oh yeah, that's funny, we have a lot more capital budget per tree than other cities. Well, why is that? I don't know why that is. And I don't know if we don't. Do you know why that is? On page 31, why do we have $33 per capital budget per tree in Palo Alto and hardly anyone has that much? Is that just that Palo Alto values trees more? And is this column showing how much the city is dedicated to trees, or is it some other effect that's going on?
That's actually a large part of the reason, is that we have a more frequent maintenance cycle than a lot of the other major cities on this chart, and these are all established urban forestry programs. We're not comparing to, you know, just a startup program in a small community.
Okay. In that case, I would toot your own horn and say that this is something to be proud of, that we are putting our money where our mouth is, and we believe trees are important, and therefore that's why that column is high. So these different columns, we compare different cities. It would really interest me if we could have some important points brought out of that chart on page 31, because there's a lot of dense data there, and it'd be really good to have someone who knows what they're talking about distill it down instead of having just me as a layman trying to figure out why are these numbers different between the different rows and columns. Okay. And I did, on one last thing, I went back to the goals and policies and programs. And again, this is a good detail in the back. I'm not sure, should the goals, policies, and programs be at the back or in the front? It's almost like if this, anyway, that's more of a nit. The one part was that you're working with Canopy to have the online tree, so I went to the Canopy's website, and it is very nice. They have different characteristics that you can have. One thing they didn't have was when you can choose, for example, what trees are good under power lines. You couldn't say, I want a tree that's good under power lines that doesn't take much water. They have different groups, but sometimes you want two characteristics, and right now the current tool does not allow you to choose ands in your search. It's just discrete lists, and I want the overlap between those two lists. If I want something that's under a power line and doesn't take much water, I want to be able to do that. So that'd be my one suggestion when you're working with Canopy, to make the search features a little more robust, full-featured.
Right, so you'd like to be able to select multiple attributes?
That would be ideal. That's easier said than done, but if they can make a database and...
Well, actually, one of the programs in the goals, policies, and programs section is to develop a preferred and restricted species list, and so I think that's very relevant to the task that is being assigned with that program, is to make that list of preferred and restricted species very accessible and user-friendly, and so being able to select by attribute, I think, would accomplish that, so thank you.
Yeah. So that's it. Like I said, I think this report is wonderful. I think you should be really proud that whoever's worked on this has done a very good job. I think it's just a little too dense right now. If you had some type of executive summary up front and some interpretation of these big data tables, I think it would be a much better report.
Commissioner Cromie.
Hi, thanks for the presentation and the rewrite. I did notice that I had been concerned about the inclusion of issues to do with ecology and habitat in the report, and I do see that you added some information on page 33, and one issue that's come up is that type of focus didn't make it into the goals and policies section, and I really appreciate that you're going to be working with the certain stakeholders to include that in the rewrite. And I look forward to seeing that, and I really do appreciate that extra work that you're doing. I think that what I have some issues with in this document, and I've mentioned it to you at the stakeholders group, is that we have trees in different settings. So we have trees on the cityscape, the streets, and then we have trees in parks and trees in the open space. And so in this report, they're kind of, they're not teased apart. And I think that it makes it harder to understand the background information that will lead us up to the goals, policies, and programs. And so I know that you're rewriting the goals, policies, and programs to tease apart a different kind of focus that you might take on trees in a park versus trees on the city streets. And I just hope that you can add some discussion into the body copy that comes before that, unless you just don't think the reader needs to understand those differences. So I'll give an example. One of the things that will come out of this report is a preferred list of trees to plant. And I know that do I understand that correctly, that you'll be working with Canopy to come up with that kind of list? Well, the types of trees that we plant on city streets might be somewhat different than the types of trees that we plant in parks, where the emphasis might be on having some of the broad-leafed trees to generate shade and different aesthetics. And also we'll have different types of trees to provide habitat for animals. And where that confusion comes up is in the survey data. When you survey the public, I was very happy to see that the public values trees for habitat. It came up as like an 80% value if you look at that survey question, which is lovely. But the public also doesn't like trees that make a mess. So when you look at the question, what does the public not like about trees? I think the first ranking item was like destroying sidewalk, if I'm remembering right. And I know second ranking was messy fruit, tree droppings. Well, those are the very things that wildlife needs. So the public themselves can't make that connection all the time, that those two things are at odds when you might value habitat protection, but you might not like a mess. But those two things go together. And so that means that you'll be differentiating that when you plant trees in certain areas, you won't want a mess. And then where habitat is not important, you can get away with not having a mess, given that our public values that. But there will be plenty of places where we want to have trees that create underbrush. They drop things, they drop fruit, they drop branches that don't get picked up to create sort of that habitat. And so I think that it's just nice to give the reader some perspective on that as you're going through this document. And it's completely missing in the canopy section. So, I think it's missing from the very start of the document that a definition of what the urban forest is, I think is missing from this document. I now see it on page 55, a description of that, but I think that people, when they think of the urban forest, I don't know if automatically trees and open space comes to mind. It didn't come to my mind when I first heard that term. I just thought you meant cityscape. So I would personally like some kind of introduction, maybe in the executives, if you add in some kind of summarizing statements, that would fit. I think that would be very nice to include that, just so that the reader gets attuned to the different types of trees and the different settings, and that the goals and policies will discuss different needs for these different settings. So I think that might be very helpful. And even in the canopy section, because the canopy section is so focused on street trees because of the data collection that you have, I really didn't see a discussion of park trees or anything to do with open space. But that when you speak about canopy, I think you mean trees in those spaces, or you need to say when we speak about canopy, we don't mean. You need to sort of give your definition, because when you have your canopy section, to my reading of this is you're only talking about the street trees. But I think you mean to include everything. It's just that you have the data on the street trees. And I think it's very valid. You just can't make up data if you don't have it. So I think just a little introductory statement that these are the data that we have, but we also look toward the future, the needs of these other settings, and we're covering those. Just some kind of statement, just so you know that you're thinking about them, even though you don't know everything yet. So the other thing is the vision statement. The vision statement is so broad that I didn't quite I didn't understand it. I like that you're trying. I don't mind that it's complex, because this is a complex topic, but I was just wondering if you could talk about, like, even the closing statement where you say opportunities presented by new development will be optimized and negative impacts of new development will be minimized. So what do you mean when you say opportunities presented by new development will be optimized?
So if you look at the photos, when we're talking about the changing canopy based on changes in development, you can see that when we've done new development, it's actually added trees, because that's a requirement of ordinance, that's a requirement of planning and zoning codes. And so we will continue to have those opportunities in the future, and there's even possibility that we could enhance those opportunities. Every time a new construction project comes through, we can potentially add more trees to that. We can figure out ways to put in trees where maybe we never even had an opportunity before, just because of a construction project. And one of the projects that we called out in the message from the urban forester is the Kyle Warren Park in Dallas, where they built a 10-acre park over the top of the Woodall Rogers Freeway. And I was in Dallas and participated in that project when the concept was explored, and it seemed like wildly optimistic. At the at the time, but now the park is built. So there's a 10-acre park over the top of a freeway. I'm not saying that we could do exactly the same thing here in Palo Alto, but to a smaller scale, we can be thinking with those kind of future forward-thinking ideas on how can we put canopy in places where, you know, maybe we never thought to put it before. So that's opportunities for development. And then obviously minimizing the negative aspects is we want to minimize how much green space that we're developing, because we have very little of it. And once you develop it and put concrete over it, it's really hard to put it back. And it's really hard to restore that natural function. So, you know, we've learned a lot of good lessons over the last 100 years of natural resources management with how hard it is to restore and how costly that is. So, you know, trying to minimize the amount of green space that we develop, focus more on redeveloping space and using that to better efficiency, I think, is the goal of the Urban Forest Master Plan.
Great, thanks for explaining that. I really do appreciate it. The last thing I just wanted to bring up was sort of the tension between trees and the sustainability movement, because I'm only just beginning to understand that part of the sustainability movement is really focused on drought-resistant trees, and some of those trees don't necessarily give us those broad leaves that we value both for aesthetics and for shade. And I feel like there's a tension there. And I'm wondering, I think it's under our purview as the Parks and Recreation Commission. As parks get redesigned, of course we care about sustainability, but we also care about other values that we've come to have in the city, and sort of expectations of what we get out of a tree. And so is there a section in this document where you talk about that natural tension?
There's actually a whole chapter dedicated to water where we talk about a lot of the ideas on how do we optimize the ability of trees to adapt to the environment that they're in. How do we make sure that they're using the minimum amount of water necessary to thrive, regardless of what species they are. So there's definitely ways for us to reduce our water usage with trees. It may mean that we change some of the traditional approaches that we've had. It may mean that we don't have turf grass underneath trees in places where we're not using it for recreational purposes. So it's a change of mentality, but we can do a lot better in the future with water conservation without dramatically changing our species composition.
Well, where does the public weigh in? Like on the surveying, the public wasn't asked, do you mind, are you going to miss having all of this? Like, would you rather that we don't reduce the water as much in certain parks? Like, is there a public piece here where people can give any kind of feedback, or is this just this policy is just here to stay? I feel like on the Parks and Recreation Commission, we're going to have to grapple with this as we look at, I just want everything to be transparent when this discussion comes up, because I think that people could be kind of caught off guard by all of a sudden not getting what they're used to getting, and they just need to know, well, we're giving something up by getting this, and we agree. I don't know how to articulate it exactly, but I just feel like it's not, like those kinds of questions weren't in your survey as far as I could tell.
Right, obviously we didn't ask questions on every aspect of the plan, but the plan in total is open to public comment. Until council says it's adopted, we're taking all the comments and trying to synthesize those into the document, regardless of if they're about water conservation or someone that wants more turf grass out there and wants Palo Alto turf from boundary to boundary, we're going to do our best to listen to all those comments, incorporate those that make sense, and present all of that information to council so that this is a transparent process.
But you did this ever go to the public other than, did you ever have outreach meetings I know it comes to the public when it comes to our commission, but I don't really see this document grew up through a public outreach mechanism at all. Have you held a meeting where you bring the public in? I know you did the online survey. I just feel like the genesis of this document has been a little bit different than sort of doing a lot of public outreach. So I don't know if the public knows to even comment on this.
Right. There's certainly been boards and commission meetings that the document was released to. It's been released through the city website. It's been released to the Canopy listserv of all of their membership. We've released it to partner groups who we've asked to distribute it. And so we have not had a series of open house meetings. And I'm not sure that that's something that we've been asked to do yet. Certainly receptive to that if that's something that folks were requesting. But at this point, we hadn't really got that from our constituents.
I know it's late in the process to ask for it. I think it's just hitting me as someone on the commission, this tension with sustainability, and I'm just coming up to speed on it myself. I don't think the general public understands it very well.
Commissioner Cromie, we're running
I
out
know
of
it's
time
getting
now,
late.
and
Sorry about.
I'm sorry. Did you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple. First of all, I love the historical perspective, down to the pipes under the Eichlers. I thought that was very informative, because those are real problems that you don't think about that are affecting the difficulties with trees in South Palo Alto. So I thought that was terrific. But skipping down to the goals, I did read every chapter of your book, and I was excited to get to page 131 where I could actually see what the goals were. So I concur with my colleague here that, an executive summary up front talking about at least the overall goals, maybe not all 8 to 12 pages of this, or maybe so, might be better. The other thing that I was surprised about is that there's so much math in the preceding 130 pages and an alarming lack of math in the objectives and goals. So when even in I did a lot of detail on goal number 1 and then saw there was similarities, but when you talk about species diversity with appropriate groupings as a policy, well, why can't that be quantified? Maybe because it kind of was in some of the prior history that you put in there. So what is the appropriate groupings? You could just put that right there. You even say a greater percentage of native and drought-tolerant species. You use the word percentage, but I don't see any percentage there. So is it, an increase of 25% over the norm? Something like that I think would be more typical and measurable as we go forward here as to what that would be. Then at one point you say, give special consideration to species at the golf course or in parks, preserves, and open spaces. Why? That's not quantified, or it's not even explained. So the second thing I say, which was going to sound like the reverse, but it's not, I don't think, is that in addition to some math to make it clearer, I think this needs a freelance writer or something to get it a little bit, again, to use Keith's phrase, more for the layman and laywoman, which starts with us and goes to council and goes to constituents. So when there's phraseology in here, like surrounding species theme, I don't quite know what that is, or some of these other emission levels of BVOCs, there's just certain areas there, I don't want to take a lot of time, but if it could just be kind of reviewed for, is this something that the normal person is going to understand as opposed to what we know that you understand? And I think that'd be helpful. And then I'm not sure who the sustainability plan team is. Is that formulated yet? I saw references to that, and that was news to me. So
It's in process. You know, we recently hired a chief sustainability officer for the city, and I think it's in a state of creation right now how sustainability is really going to roll out.
Okay. And then you referenced canopy a lot, which is great, but I hear you in your oral presentation tonight say you're expanding that to other stakeholders, which I think is, you know, really important. That worked quite well on the tree mitigation issue, and
Yes.
it will here as well. And then you do emphasize importance of communication to, as this thing goes forward, to everyone. Don't like the idea that you say the website's going to be the primary way of doing it, because that's very passive. So, you know, if we have to depend on everybody going to the website, we're going to have the similar problems that we have now of people chopping down trees in their yards. So I will stop there.
Commissioner Markovich.
I had a quick one on page 93, where it's regarding shade requirements for parking lots, and you used a reference to Cal State Northridge showing solar panels in their parking lot. It would be nice, and maybe even more powerful, if you used a local reference, such as Los Altos High School, which also has solar panels over their parking lot, because that is a better reference for people nearby, because Cal State's a lot farther away. Thanks.
Did you have another comment? Commissioner Ashley?
I am agreeing with my other commissioners as well that an executive summary, or even not executive, layperson summary is very useful, as well as community outreach, not so much that they want to read, you know, over 100 pages of an urban forest plan and all this data, but given the reaction to the public of the tree loss on California Avenue, I think it is worthwhile to look into some form of community meeting or community feedback mechanism, just to say, you know, we hear you, we're valuing trees, and this is how we're moving forward, just so they have a chance to respond to a presentation and a summary. There's a lot of good information in here about the discrepancy between North and South Palo Alto, for example, that I think is just not really accessible to the public, but would be very well received by the public.
Okay, thank you. We are scheduled to meet with the community environment assistance partners, CEAP, CEAP.
I just have a few additional comments. On page 5, you talk about establishing baselines for future monitoring and management, and you list challenges, expectations, and monitoring plans for canopy cover, species composition, et cetera. And I'd love to see ecosystem impacts added to the kinds of things that you're monitoring baselines for. Then on page 25, which is the discussion of the e-tree studies or analyses, you say in that second paragraph, both types of analysis are industry standard and widely accepted as being relevant to city planning. And then you go on to talk about the analyses. But I think a big issue that has come to our attention is that a lot of the habitat ecosystem type things that many of the stakeholders are concerned about are not quantifiable, so they don't fit neatly into an iTree analysis. So I would love to see another sentence added in that section to the effect of, however, it should be noted that these analyses do not incorporate the hard to quantify yet critical benefit of trees to the wildlife ecosystem. Something that acknowledges that, yeah, we have this great analysis tool, but everybody should know that it's limited in the scope of what it does. It's not a be-all and end-all. Then on page 94, under mitigation, even if discretionary design review does require keeping a tree. I think that's supposed to be does not require keeping a tree. It might require mitigation for its removal. And then I was looking for, so you talk about mitigation and it says the subheading says replacement of removed trees, but it does, there's nothing in that in either of those paragraphs about replacement, except for the transplanting issues. So you talk about transplanting, but not about replacement. I think it'd be nice to have some information about replacement, and maybe that's just a reference to the tree manual, or maybe there are some key issues related to replacement that should be identified there. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. I babbled through that one. Then on page 128, I think this is my last comment. Urban forest benefits versus other priorities. This is a section about broadleaf trees, large broadleaf trees. And I think I talked about this last time we looked at this. And the second line says, however, integrated sustainability requires consideration of a laundry list of other things that may be inconsistent with increasing broadleaf tree inclusion. So you say, therefore, it may, at the bottom of that first column, therefore, it may not follow that the goal can be to increase the percentage of large broadleaf trees or the canopy. I thought that whole section, it's very tentative. It says, yeah, we want more large broadleaf trees, but there are all these problems with it, so we might not be able to have that as a goal. Well, I don't understand why we couldn't, as the goal, I don't understand why it can't still be a goal that is considered in balance with the many other goals that you're trying to serve through the plan. So I think a goal still could be to increase the percentage of large broadleaf trees to the maximum feasible extent, or in a balanced approach with the interests of sustainability. I don't think integrated sustainability requires exclusive consideration of these bulleted items here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You get what I'm saying? Okay. And that's it for me. Any final comments? Commissioner Lowey?
I just had one format question. Would it be possible next time when we see this to get a red line version so we can see the changes? If that's not too much trouble, that'd be really helpful. Because then we can see the, yeah, and even if those additions come from other sources, not just us, we can at least see in the 138 pages the deltas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming twice to cover this meaty report. We look forward to seeing you next month. So that takes us to item number 4. Recommend to council a park improvement ordinance for El Camino Park Capital Improvement Project. I don't have any public input cards. If there's anyone in the public who would like to speak to this matter, please get a card into Catherine. And this is an action item following our discussion from last month.
Good evening, Darren Anderson, Open Space Parks and Golf. Again, I'm here tonight to ask your recommendation to the council that they approve the park improvement ordinance for El Camino Park. The commission's discussed this project for almost 4 years, over 20 meetings. So tonight I'll mainly focus on the recent updates to the design, which were discussed at that January 21st meeting, which is mainly the lighting plan. And a quick update on what that lighting plan change was. It was adding 4 field lights to the north synthetic field. Previously, it had been to stub out the electrical conduit only, and then we would come back and add the lights subsequent to public outreach and finding additional funding. And then adding 2 lights to the south field. This is to allow for night play for both soccer and lacrosse, since we now have a removable fence on that south natural grass field. On February 19th, staff held a community meeting on that lighting plan. We had field users and residents of the 101 Alma condominiums present. The participants were generally satisfied that the lighting plan is appropriate for this site. Some of the things we discussed were the merits of the 50-foot versus 70-foot light poles. The meeting participants did agree that the 70-foot pole, the taller of the two options, was best suited for both the field users in that it would provide the best lighting of the field and minimize the heat that comes off those lights for the field users. And for the residents of 101 Alma, the benefit was that you contain the light spillage a little bit better than that 50-foot option. The project timeline for this project is that will be completed in fall of 2015. And I'm available to questions for the commission, but I also wanted to take just a moment to thank, really to offer my sincere thanks for the commission for your patience with this long process. I really appreciate it, and really for the deep commitment and sustained passion and drive to ensure that we end up with the best design. I really appreciate it.
Any comments or discussion? Or motion?
I'll set forth a motion.
Second?
I have one question about the lighting. Have you looked into the lights, making them deeper parabolas to prevent spillage from the lights directly into the apartments?
That came up at the public meeting, and Paul from Siegfried, the designer, took note of that, and I talked to him subsequently. This is the latest and greatest of the designs from Musco Lighting is what we saw presented, so there isn't a newer or better technique.
There's no such animal to have it get it?
Currently, that's true.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to make a motion.
You did.
Oh, I did, that,
To recommend that city council approve.
the city council, our commission, right? What do I have to say? Oh, to recommend council for the park improvement ordinance for El Camino Park capital improvement project.
Which I seconded.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we're back on.
Thanks to your effort too, Dara.
Yeah.
The only thing that's wrong in this report is it says 2010. I think it was 2001. It feels like it must be that long ago.
Thanks, Darren. Okay, next we have review design for the Magical Bridge Playground Capital Improvement Project. This is a discussion item, and Peter Jensen will be presenting.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, Peter Jensen, Landscape Architect for the City of Palo Alto, here to present a very magical and exciting project, which the Commission has seen before in some earlier design state. Now we have focused the budget and have a better design. So we, this evening, want to present the Magical Bridge Playground, the design for that playground, and hopefully with some luck and some good graces that this summer we will be working on constructing that playground. So with us tonight, we have Cordelia Hill from RHAA. They are actually the original landscape architecture firm that worked on the design of Mitchell Park in the 50s. And they are the landscape architecture firm working with the city and the Friends of the Magical Bridge to come up with a design. So we're basically going to go through a presentation. Cordy is going to do that, talk about the design. Then we can take questions and comments after. Our goal is to come back next month with a park improvement ordinance to send to the council for approval of this. So that's kind of our timeline, and I'll let Cordy take it away.
One question.
Oh, yes.
Wasn't there some uncertainty about how much funding was going to be, and there was a couple designs we're considering depending on the level of funding?
Yes.
What's the status on that?
Yes, before we had a larger, or I guess a more expensive design that was definitely larger in scale than the one we're going to look at tonight. That was estimated in range from $4 to $4.5 million. And we also then had a more defined and smaller scale design that went along with the initial letter of intent for a $1.3 basically million playground. In the time over basically the last year, the Friends of the Magical Bridge have been raising funds for the construction of the playground. And as time has gone on basically, and the fundraising process has gone on, the Friends working with city staff basically has set a goal for what they have going with the fundraising at $3.2 million basically is the construction budget for the playground itself. Currently, the funds raised are approximately $2.8 million, so it is getting very close. And we feel that within the next month that the Friends will have the full amount basically to construct the playground. That is one of the aspects of the agreement between the Friends and the city, is that the funds have to be fully raised before the actual construction can take place. So that is a stipulation in it, and the Friends are getting closer. So a few months ago when we decided about setting that budget, basically that then assisted us. Most projects are built with a budget as the first thing. That wasn't a part of this project because it was based on fundraising. So when we could solidify the amount that the Friends were comfortable in fundraising in a time frame that they could do so, we set basically that budget and then looked at the design and basically reconfigured the design to meet that budgetary number. So that's where we are tonight, basically. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. It's nice to be back. So for those of you who are not familiar, the playground will occur in the southeast corner of Mitchell Park. It's
if you want to.
Great.
Show later.
It's directly adjacent to the second group of tennis courts. The playground will be built in this area. One of the things that we did that set the design was an analysis of the vegetation, the topography, circulation, and the boundary. And the view from the existing bridge, you can see that it's a heavily wooded site. However, some of the trees will need to be removed, not because to accommodate play equipment, but because an arborist report found that they were not in good health. The proposed playground area is the large area adjacent to the tennis courts. We developed the design with the input of the community. We presented initially two options. Oops. In those two options, it came out that one of the biggest concerns was maintaining the existing bike trail, as well as having a fully accessible playground on many levels. So from those two options and the input we got, we came up with an initial design where we actually have improved the bike access by widening the curve around the tennis court. We got a lot of feedback. There was a lot of conflict there at that corner. And by flattening the slope so that it's easier for everyone to get up over the bridge. This design that you saw last year assumed that we would have actually new bridge construction. The design that is being shown to you tonight, we are only going to renovate the bridge at this point in time. So that's one of the biggest changes.
What does that mean, renovate? Is that you're not changing the arc at all? Or?
No, we're not changing the arc. We're changing the approaches to it. The bridge itself is not the issue. The issue is the approaches. So
you're flattening that out so it's not quite as steep.
Right, it's quite a bit. It's less than 5%.
Okay. Yeah, currently now, the approach ramps to the bridge don't meet any type of ADA accessibility at all. They are way above the grade and incline that they need to be. As far as the bridge work itself goes, and renovation to it would be focusing on changing the deck material out, looking at the handrails and replacing those things to just improve the current bridge now. Staff definitely is working on trying to find more funding, basically grant funding, to replace that bridge. It does need to be replaced just because it's limited size, and it's not really the length but the width from handrail to handrail. Currently it's only about 4 feet 9 inches wide, which is not wide enough to we feel to sustain the traffic on it. So we would like to change that bridge, and hopefully within the next few years we will change out the bridge as well. The plan that will be built with the existing bridge will, though, accommodate a new bridge once that is in place. So,
Thank you.
So the second major change is that to consolidate the playground so that it was more financially feasible, we're now holding this as an open lawn area. We think it actually allows a different type of play to happen, but rather than putting equipment in that area. So the plan that is before you tonight is this one. So as you cross the bridge, there's an immediate entrance here into the playground, on an upper level into a playhouse, which we'll show you in sketches in a few minutes, across to the slide mound, which was part of the initial plan you saw. The playhouse and the stage is a new feature of this plan. We had separate stages and separate playhouses and separate forts, so now it's a combined structure. And you also, upon entering here, can come down directly into the playground in this fashion, separated from the bike trail. There's a second entrance in this area that is off the bike trail, and there will be bike parking and an access entry gate through here. The way that the playground is divided now will this is what the perspective looks like now as you cross the bridge. So as you cross, this is the tree house and tree walk area. And you can see in the sketch what the tree house will look like. One of the key features that we've always wanted to capture in this playground is being in the trees, and having children of all abilities be able to be up, to be king of the mountain, to be on top of a fort. So those features are still a key part of this. And there will be individual things such as binoculars and this feature where you stand on it and a platform and it slowly descends. So ways for children from top to bottom to interact with each other, pulleys, and some of those other features. We've done this diagram to show you some of the key things that we looked at for all areas. So is it wheelchair accessible? The whole upper area is. In some cases, in special pieces of equipment, it's accessible with transfer, meaning that you do need to leave a wheelchair, but it is accessible. Sensory features, in this case, it's the trees themselves, and places to retreat. Some children need a place to retreat. They can't take the high level of activity of a playground on a constant basis. So, and this is what the fort playground feature is. Looking at, this is from taking an aerial view basically above the tennis courts to show you how it all fits together from that perspective. As you go on the lower level below the playground, you're in the stage and nature play and picnic area. And there will be features such as the sensory boxes, which are bins where things such as the ground material and pine needles and things, eucalyptus leaves that children who can't touch the ground can experience them, and they allow you to have scent and play. And as I mentioned, the stage is now part of this in this area, as well as picnic tables. One of the features that we have done is all the picnic tables have center wheelchair access, so you're not always on the end. And then there is going to be a special feature in this area that's being designed that is a touch and sound feature that's still being designed at this point. And again, this is how there's many levels of play. And the climbing and sliding hill is very similar to what you saw before. 3 different slides, each allowing a child a different experience. In addition, different types of climbers and banister slides. And all of the different types of activities that are available. And the music and interactive zone will include all types of chimes, drums, and various ways of making music. There's also some experimentation now with some uniquely designed features. So there's right now just placeholders in the design. They're not finished design yet. And again, how it all works together. And then finally, the 3 areas that are on the southern edge of the playground include the swinging and swaying zone. So we've allowed a variety of different types of swings. We've also have a sway boat, which is a feature that a child in a wheelchair can get in, and anybody can get in, and it moves, so it allows that inner ear experience that children need for development without having to transfer. And we're incorporating the adult exercise equipment into this area too. And again, how that all works together in terms of meeting all of the needs. And the spinning zone features 5 different types of spinners, including such things as the cocoon spinner and the nest spinner for children who need to be enclosed in retreat, and the fully integrated carousel. So again, a child or an adult in a wheelchair can participate. And finally, the tot zone has springs, small slide climbers, loop climbers, playhouse, and these are all designed for the 2 to 4-year-olds, so much smaller children, smaller in scale activities. The playhouse climber affords an opportunity to retreat, and there's also the Kinderbales will allow sound use on a much smaller scale. And how it fits together. So that's the playground now.
So yeah, so walking through the playground, as you can see, and how it's divided basically into play zones. The key features that really separate, I think, this playground from other inclusive playgrounds are the fact that each zone does pay particular interest to a specific style of play. So the spinning, the swinging, the sliding, and it provides multiple options for doing that type of play. So there should be apparatus or equipment in that area for all users to use to basically experience how that play goes. The other interesting aspect of each area is that there is a retreat area or areas designated as a retreat. So children that are new to the playground and have not experienced before can sit and watch other kids play and take that in before they jump into the play. Or kids also have the ability to get overstimulated while playing, so they can be removed basically from the play area to calm down basically a little bit in the playground itself. There are, as Cordy mentioned before, the Friends of the Magical Bridge are working with a small committee from Stanford on developing some innovative musical elements that will be incorporated into the playground, most specifically into the music area that are inclusive, but also are very innovative and kind of going along with the idea of living in Palo Alto in the Silicon Valley and the technology that we have and how we can meld those things to really make unique sound experiences that can not only be fun to play with, but also soothing and promote playing together. So those things are very exciting, and I hope over the next several weeks we resolve all those pieces. Going to be there's 3 to 4 pieces basically that is going to entail. So those will be added pieces to the music element of the playground. With that, I will open it up to any more comments.
I just wanted to add there's some other small features such as tactile domes when you're entering an area. So if you are visually impaired, you can know you've entered into an active area. But then there's going to be a map of the playground in bronze or probably fiberglass, because bronze might be stolen, that allows a child who's visually has visual challenges to orient themselves and figure out where they are and how it all fits together. There's small little features such as a cane holder at the top of the slides. So we're trying to make sure that all levels are thought about.
And I would like to point out too, we do have a representative of the Friends of the Magical Bridge. Emily is here, and I just want to point out, I think we think about the playground as being for children, but it's really for everyone to use. So not just for the kids that have disability or slowed down in some way to be able to use the park, but kids of all levels and using abilities, as well as their parents and adults. And there are definitely also adults that have cognizant disabilities that are full-size adults but have a cognizant ability of a child. So the playground has to be entailed to basically allow all those users to be incorporated into it as well. Courtney did mention that we've even added a few adult workout equipment basically in the playground as well, for people to work out while they're there when watching their kids. The location of the playground is also very close to a senior center there, which we feel that providing some of those opportunities would be inclusive to everyone as well, besides just users of the park. So.
Real broad range and variety of cool stuff with a mere $3.2 million. When we look at what we're spending on El Camino Park, we're not getting nearly as much variety there. And I think it's much closer to the Cadillac version than I ever imagined would be possible, so that's very exciting. And also seems very consistent with your original goals and obviously reflects a tremendous amount of very thoughtful, hard work. I'd like to open to comments or questions from the Commission. Commissioner Rectal.
So on the top, just on the north side of the tennis court, that's a path that connects over to the...
Abilities United.
Okay. And so that will have easy access between the two sites?
Yes, they'll come this way to meet grade. This is an elevated, as we mentioned, an elevated ramp. So the slope starts at this point. That's how we've achieved a much flatter slope, is by much longer. So, but they'll have direct access.
If we were to replace that bridge, would you lower it down so the peak of the bridge would be lower?
No, the bridge has to maintain pretty much where the deck is now for clearance for the Santa Clara Valley Water District. They don't want any possibility of obstruction.
During floods, this is, or for maintenance?
And this is a maintenance path along here for them. It will also function as a play path, but it needs to be clear of any equipment.
But the kids will be able to run on that?
Yes.
It'll be open?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the lifespan for this park? How long will the equipment last?
It really varies according to the piece of equipment. So there may be pieces that have to be changed out much faster. Fortunately, the playground manufacturers have gotten a lot smarter. For instance, the cable structures, of which there are two on this. Now, instead of having to replace the entire cable net, you can replace a single strand. So there's a lot of the equipment is the type of thing that you'll see in place for 20, 30 years. Generally, most of it, I would expect you'll end up replacing because the safety codes have changed, or there's something more exciting.
And so maintenance, is the Parks Department doing all the maintenance, or is the Friends doing part of that, or?
The city takes responsibility for maintaining the park once it's constructed, or the playground once it's constructed.
Okay, and it'll just be this regular renovation, just like any other park would be done?
Yes, it would be just like we're doing for the Eleanor Party Park right now and reconstructing the tot lot there, that it would be the responsibility of the city to repair or renovate as necessary.
Okay. And also, when I look to the right there seems to be some space to the right of the tennis courts. Can we move the tennis courts over at all to the right?
I mean,
It would be, the tennis courts exist. And so it would be a major expense to move them over. Plus that line, all those black dots are existing trees that act as a buffer between the park and the adjacent properties. So
for the tennis courts, we periodically resurface. Do you know where in the cycle we are on that resurfacing?
I do not. I mean, I can speak from just seeing them that they are in pretty good shape. They're not used a lot, but I do see users out there every once in a while, but they are in fairly good shape and are usable. So,
because I know like at Rinconada, we said that when the next time we resurface, we were going to slide them over 10 feet or some other amount.
Well, that was a yes. So I guess there's two different types of renovation for the courts. Most of them now currently are being top dressed, basically painted. That we're working on. Eventually, when the base fails, that's when, as far as Rinconada goes, we would then consider sliding in the tennis courts over. That would be to do more of repairs to the actual concrete and tearing pieces of it out to re-pour them again. In this case right now, the tennis courts, the sub base is in good shape, so it's not going anywhere.
If this tennis court was in bad condition, so they had to move it, or so it was convenient to move it, would we move it? When I look at this, I see some green space on the right and it looks rather cramped on the left. Are we happy where the court is, or would we slide it?
This goes back to our other large-scale project, the Parks Master Plan, which is we'll look at things like these and look at amenities like our tennis courts and decide on if this is a good place for it, if we have enough of those amenities that maybe could not be there anymore. So
I'm not talking about getting rid of it. I'm talking about, would a magical bridge be easier to build if that tennis court was over 10 feet, or are we happy with where it is right now?
I think that for the equipment that the Friends wanted to get in there and their goals and objectives for the playground, that where it is now is okay. Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner Cromie.
It's beautiful. I can't wait to see it. Are you worried at all about the bicycle traffic? And are there any provisions, special safety provisions that need to go in? Because I'm wondering if people are entering it from that lower corner, are the children going to be going along on that bike trail alongside bicycles?
Definitely. I mean, that was one of the big discussion items all along, and that's why we originally came up with the two-bridge concept. I think the more potential for conflict is actually at the bridge. This is a 10-foot wide walk now, so at least there's room to jump to the side or move to the side. And you can see much better now, too. So right now, as you come along the bike trail, you just kind of pop around the corner. If someone's there, you really... it's a surprise. So I think that this is not ideal, but as Peter said, the city is looking at replacing the bridge and putting much wider bridge in. And one of the goals on the bridge replacement, which I assume is still there, is to have a bulb out in the middle of the bridge to allow a place of retreat. So if you feel like people are coming at you too much. So.
Okay, I would just think it might be nice to, at some point, once the park is open, to assess the safety and make sure everything's working out right. And then I know it can cost money to make adjustments, but I'd like us to be mindful of how it plays out.
Yes, we definitely will be looking at that. We've had conversations with transportation about if the bridge and the ramp should be just dedicated to walking, and we should have some type of sign there that is encouraging bikers to dismount. Of course, those types of things, if you really want them to work, take people to monitor it, which is probably not going to happen. We can try in our best efforts to make that happen, but that's definitely, it is something that we'll definitely be monitoring when the playground is open, how that interaction is occurring between the pedestrians and the bikes using the pathway. Definitely the pathway is used at specific times during the day where it has heavy traffic, before school and after school, of course. And it definitely does get traffic during the day, but not at like it does at those specific times. So I think we are helped out, I think, a little bit by it's not being overly used all day long heavily like it is at those specific times. So there could be options of also patrolling or monitoring the use during those time periods as well, to make sure that everything is happening okay. Currently right now though, the kids go up those ramps and across that bridge back and forth right next to each other, and they're it's happening, and they're making it happen. So I would hope that with a wider bridge that it definitely would be a lot safer and easier for them to do. But currently it's functioning for what it is, but we will definitely keep an eye on that as the playground is built. So.
And my last question has to do about the canopy that was there. This was quite a natural area before it has been renovated to become this park. So just as a question, did you measure the canopy that was there to start with, and then what you're going to end up with, and decide has it shrunk at all?
We are following the recommendations that are laid out in the urban master plan of restoring the canopy there. So we will be planting trees to restore that canopy, hopefully back to its full level within the 10-year time frame. We are proposing to plant some very large specimen trees, though, in the playground to bring back the shade, because that is a very important feature. And as you can see along the edge, those two trees and then the tree in the middle basically are not your typical 15-gallon tree that's our size, but we're looking at 30-foot tall, basically Quercus lobata oak trees to put in there. Not only large trees, but native trees as well. So that is the goal of the playground itself, to introduce basically native large-scale trees back. So day one, we are providing the shade protection that it has right now. And eventually, hopefully with some luck, that those trees will grow larger than the actual trees that were there before. So we are definitely taking that consideration. The shade is, if you walk around the site, that's one of the best parts of the existing sites now. It definitely does have a very mature large canopy, and it is covered very well. That, I think, was one of the main aspects that attracted the Friends to this particular location, besides it not being used very much, but it does have good shade. So unfortunately, some of the trees that are there, the structure of them and their particular types aren't the best for a playground, and they do present themselves with a hazard there to it. So we do have to remove those trees, but we are definitely looking at putting some large-scale trees back to get the shade back.
There are two great cork oaks here, which really have a nice canopy, and you'll be able to go under those. And they have wonderful bark that kids can pull off. It is the bark that's used for wine corks. et cetera. And there's a large pine tree that is remaining. There were 3 others that were recommended removal because of crotch and bug issues. So there will be some mature trees as well as the 3 new ones. And then this is a line of eucalyptus on the south edge. So there actually is quite a bit of shade on this bottom third of the site. So.
One other thing I think is worth keeping in the back of our mind for follow-up to see how it plays out over time is the parking situation. Obviously, there's a lot of parking there in that Mitchell Park parking lot, but to the extent that carries overflow from the new library and community center and or this Magical Bridge playground, that could become compacted, and we're going to want to be thinking about ways to alleviate that.
Yes, definitely. That is something that we'll definitely be monitoring once the playground is open. And there are some opportunities to increase the parking for those cars that have placards, but nothing has been formalized now, so I can't really speak on those things. But for now and for this plan, we were definitely just using the Mitchell Park parking lot unless it is impacted too greatly, and then we are looking at other options to expand the parking possibility for it.
Great. Thank you very much.
I have one last question. How's this drain? It looks like we have a lot of materials here that are impervious to water. Does it drain off the side, or where does the rain go?
Currently, that area now drains to the creek that's there, into the channelized area. And eventually, the runoff that is excess will do the same thing when the playground is built.
But each of these spots, are there drains built into it, or are they all canted so that it goes off to the side?
In the play zones underneath the rubber surfacing has drains. They all have basically, each area has a drain. So there is a network of drains basically out there that's catching all the water.
Okay.
We have discussed as well in the spinning zone, the swinging zone, and the tot lot where those things are level, there is the opportunity to construct the rubberized surfacing without a concrete subbase that allows more permeability to those spaces as well. So we are looking at the option to maintain the permeable surfacing that's there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very exciting. I can't wait for it to come to life. All right, let's move on to item number 6, ad hoc committee ideas for improving the commission website. And we put some stuff in your packet for this. The first page kind of lays out our goals in a series of degrees. So item number 1 is kind of the key things we definitely want to be able to find a way to accomplish. And then 2 and 3 and 4 are things we'd like you're thinking about whether it's worth some significant effort to expand to that extent. And then 5, 6, and 7 are kind of the next steps to move forward. So let me focus first on item number 1. We want to expand the content of the site in order to better inform and educate the public. That includes highlighting current and recent Parks and Rec Commission issues by linking to staff reports, commission deliberations, press coverage, other related action, and making it findable by topic. We also want to add some tools to provide quick and ready access to commonly sought information like field and trail closures, park and trail maps, and some other things in that parenthetical there. So I'd like to discuss tonight what kinds of things you think are key for the tools or resources section that we would want to be able to be sure to have accessible from the Parks and Rec website, as opposed to just leaving them within the web of links on the other city pages. I lost my train of thought. Oh, then in order to connect to those tools and issues, we would identify the appropriate links with other city websites to so we're not reposting everything, duplicating it, but connecting to the same source. And we wanted to look at a little further at the Community Services Department pages to make sure that the key information, the tools kind of information that we don't include on our site and that we do include on our site is easy to find through various gateways. So if we come up with a list of 10 things that we think the public is interested in finding frequently, we don't want them to have to go through 5 different steps to find it. We want to pull those things out to the front and make them easy to find. And then finally, correspondence from the public to the commission. We get those when they come into the commission email. Catherine sends them around to all the commissioners for a review, but we don't have a process for posting them so that we can find them later if we've emptied out our email box, or so that other members of the public can access them and see what comments have come in. And we also don't have a process for responding to them. So that's something we'd like to address in the website discussion as well. And then on the second page is the timeline of how we think our work might progress, the work of the ad hoc. And the third page is the current and recent topics that we would propose including in that issues section. And then the next page are two examples of kind of possible format within the framework of the existing standard boards and commissions websites. One is it, do you want to walk through those, Stacy? Or would you like me?
Yeah, it's just the first one is a 2-column layout that's currently used within the city website, and the second one is a 3-column layout that's currently used. So we just started with what's already there on the city website and are proposing the types of content and the location of it, and that's what we're looking for your feedback on.
So as you can see, the way up on the board, the way the website is currently set up, in case you all don't look at it regularly, it has this whole big section on recruitment and what our mission is, and then lists who we are, and then links to agendas by date. So there's no way to find if somebody's interested in our discussion on dog parks. You have to look through, if you don't know the date of it, you have to look through every single one of those things to find the agenda item, and then you have to go to the next month to get the minutes for the discussion on that agenda item. So we thought it was really important to pull out the issues. And you also have to scroll to the bottom to get the only source of information there is. So that's why we looked at these different layouts to pull out sort of key items all up front on the first page. Also, other things we might want to add to the tools, things that people might want access to, are things like the master plans, the Baylands master plan, the Arastradero Trail plan, all the kind of Parks and Rec guiding documents should be accessible from the commission webpage.
Yes. May I? I love that we're going to be doing this because the current website is so cumbersome and it just doesn't provide any kind of visual, it doesn't draw you in visually. So just from a marketing perspective, there's no pizzazz, for lack of a better word. I really like that it would be issue specific, so people, because the whole point of having a website is to get information quick, concise, to the point, and find what you need. And this, it kind of feels like you're lost in a store and you can't find the right aisle. So I love that it would be broken down in pieces. Some of the things that I was thinking about is how to make it more interesting and relevant so people will come back and use it, and they want to come back. So one of the things I was thinking about was maybe a section on how we want to educate our community with issues that we know that they feel very issues that they find interesting. For instance, if we go back to we don't want people to feed the wildlife, and why. If we had a monthly editorial from an expert on why it's harmful to feed wildlife, and another month we would have fun facts on trees, and we'd have some information about interesting things on trees. So there's a reason, in addition to just finding information, but some things that people would find useful, interesting, and go, gosh, it's a learning opportunity. I didn't know that Palo Alto had X amount of oak trees, and if you have an oak tree in your yard, this is what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't have a sprinkler head right on top of it because you could overwater it and kill the root. What? I just made that up, but do you know, that's what it is true. I do know that. But, I mean, yeah, that was the kind of thing. So I think just making it relevant is great. The other thing that I wasn't sure about was with regard to the legalities of having how the comments, and you have a question mark with regard to the privacy issues and the strategy for responses. I don't know what that looks like yet, and I know you don't either, but that was definitely something that I questioned, whether that's an issue. I love having the opportunity to having partners that are stakeholders and having them contribute commentary. Bird migration, look for the yellow-tailed swallow something in April because they come through. Something fun. And lastly, I mentioned this earlier in the evening, having some sort of interactive map that's just spectacular, visually spectacular, and just so easy. It's just, you touch a particular park, it pops up all of the facilities that are available at the park, how you rent picnic tables for a birthday party, what's allowed at birthday. I had a neighbor knock on my door. I want to put a jumpy house in Eleanor Party Park, and I'm like, nope. But people just don't know that, but she happens to live next door to me. But think all of that information that we know people want to know. And now I'm done talking. Thank you. For now.
Go ahead, Commissioner Ashman.
I defer to Rob because I think you're going to say the same thing. I was just...
Yeah, so what I would be a little concerned about with some of those comments, I mean, I agree with all of that, but I'm not sure that it really belongs on the commission website. It's more related to the parks website, or yeah, and so I can show you up here. I think so. This is the community services home page, and there's lots of pages here, including a parks homepage, a recreation, summer camps, and all of these things that I think this can be improved upon, and we ought to have interactive maps and some other things there. But I think that sort of belongs more here than on the Parks and Rec Commission page. So I wouldn't want to duplicate, redo the work so that it's on the Commission page and on the department, page. So.
Maybe we're just driving traffic
right,
to your, so
yeah.
it's, if you want to know more about hosting a party in the park,
yeah,
click here kind of thing, and it just drives people
goes to theirs,
yeah,
Yeah.
because the whole point is to keep driving them back to the appropriate, it's
Yeah.
not recreating the wheel, it's just making it more cohesive. And if people want information about dogs, they're visiting Palo Alto, or they're not familiar, or they just got a dog, or they're not familiar with what the rules. There's different places they can go, but they're always driven back to the central source of information.
Yeah,
and making it a good user experience.
There's a lot of pages on the department homepage, and so which ones make the most sense to link, from the commission page? And that was something we talked about, and we want to make sure that it's not overwhelming, so it's too many, so it's easy to navigate. but it'd be interesting to see what the rest of the commission thinks. And maybe that's something you can all do, is look at the department homepage and give feedback on what you think is most appropriate to link from the commission page. You know?
My feeling is that if we're putting links on our homepage because the parks website is convoluted, maybe we should fix the parks website. Yeah.
I was just going to make a couple comments. First, it's just a Superior ad hoc committee report. So to our two colleagues who put that together. And it's innovative, so it's not just the normal stuff. So there's some real thought that's gone into this. I do want to leap immediately down to where did I find it? Number 5, the strategy to keep the site up to date. This is not trivial. Not trivial. Rob's got enough to do, I think, so we don't. So we really have to think through that one. And if you put it up, you got to keep it up, right? I mean, you got to keep it up to date. You can't just put it up annually and say we're going to tweak it. And I don't even know where the initial budget or design stuff comes in, if that's a CSD budget or what. But we would really have to have a strategy for that. Now, there's ways to parse that out for the content that goes up there. For example, this one suggestion about various topics, you know, we could all split that up, and there's 7 of us, and if we did it quarterly, we could get through almost 2 years with only having to do one. So there's ways to do that, and we don't have to cooperate to do it, but let's just not underestimate that. The other thing on here that I think we have to be really careful about is if we're having other folks that are participating on the website that aren't commissioners, first of all, should we or not? But even the links, you know, if somebody says, well, I want a link because I want jumpies in Pardee Park or wherever that was, and I want to, you know, we have to have a policy that just kind of rules that out. And I think it has to be pretty strictly contained to, you know, stuff that's happening here, not public comment. Hence, you know, the letters and things like that. So, but great start.
I think Catherine wanted to say something. She maintains the websites.
Go ahead.
We do currently have a web page committee. So CSD has been working currently on getting input from everybody in CSD on how and what they want to change in the web page. So a lot of your comments tonight are already being incorporated. So more to come.
For the commission webpage or for the CSD page?
For the whole city web page, the whole site for the city. There's a committee already being in place, and they're all going through trying to decide on how they're going to change and make these changes. I'm not sure of the timeline, but we've already had.
So the commission's input is probably pretty timely then.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this would be helpful as they work on the design of the website, the city website.
Commissioner Cromie.
Thanks so much for getting going on this. I think it's really exciting. And thanks for the presentation of the different formats. I tend to like the 3-column format. It's just a little bit more interesting visually. I was wondering, like, instead of saying the word issues, you might just say like exciting topics or current topics. Issues just reminds me of a magazine, the word issues. One thing I wanted to see on this, I wanted to hope that we can list our minutes separately, because I think I didn't even figure out how to get our minutes for a couple years. I was missing them, and I was trying to go back and look at them, and then finally I realized you can click on the agenda, but I don't think most people can figure that out. I think most people are really looking to a link that says minutes, and it's a little confusing because in past years we have that on the website, and then all of a sudden they just disappear. So can we go back to having a separate link for each month for minutes?
I think that makes sense. That's how council does it now as well.
It's just
It is
more
easier
simple.
because you don't have to back up a month or jump forward a month or whatever it is you do.
It's just more consistent with other government web pages, I think. So I'd really like to see that. And then Are we going to have a search box just for our pages? It's not a general, it's just going to be our own search box? Is that what you're thinking here?
We didn't add one. There's in the header of the entire website, there's a consistent search box in the upper right-hand corner.
For the citywide.
For the whole website.
So is there any way to make it, is it too difficult to make it just for our content?
It's functionality, right? So it's not just rearranging content, it's functionality. So yeah, defer to Rob on that as well.
Yeah, we have to sort of stick within a certain template that the city uses, so that search box remains the same on each page. I don't believe we can do that.
Okay, how would we post our recommendations? Because I think that's something really important that comes out of our commission. What's the concept here for posting?
So the concept would be to sort them by issue or topic, and then, so we'd have maybe on the front page, we would highlight three of the hottest topics, the stuff we're embroiled in right now, and then have a link to the full list, this current and recent topics list, so that someone could look down that list, the full list, to find the subject they're interested in and each individual piece. So if I just want to know what the commission's recommendation was about the golf course, I'd look under golf course and click on park recommendation, and that would pull up the paper that we submitted to council.
So the park recommendation would be a separate link under each topic if we happen to have one. So we're going to have what sort of an inner page, an inner web page that you can, when you say more, how is it going to open up to the more?
So on the front page, when you first visit the site, you're going to have your 3 or 4 highlighted issues, and it say, for more Parks and Rec hot topics, click here. And then that will pull up this entire list, right? And then you click on each individual item, and it'll link to a document. But it's not a wildly interactive, I don't understand the science of it, but I think that there's a difference between linking to a page as opposed to just linking to a document that Stacy understands.
Right, so you will have a page display of everything and then links within that take you.
So it's not technically a new website. It doesn't take you to another website. It just takes you to a list.
Think of it as nesting.
Documents.
So you have, so you have the top line, and then you have pages or our official documents nested sequentially under the one topic that specifies whatever you're specifically looking for with regard to timeline, recommendation, and all of these other bullet points that Stacy and Jennifer laid out.
Right, I like that structure because you confuse the user sometimes by navigating them too far away. So if you're just keeping it all contained within our own web pages, I like that. I mean, certainly you'll navigate a way to get to some kind of document. I don't know, you guys will figure out.
They won't feel that they've gone.
They won't feel like
they're just going to see the document.
Right, yeah.
They're not going to know that it came from somewhere.
Right, it's just going to open up. Yes, I like that. I think this is a huge improvement. Thank you.
And you have the minutes in your packet. Thank you. Item number 7. Any edits, revisions to, yes, Commissioner Lowing.
That's a different commissioner, okay.
Lowing.
Under oral communications, number 2 there, Sherry, this is 3 different sentences, and it's listed as one. So she commented that there's no need for a cap, that's a sentence. So to diminish the park for animals, that's a sentence, and also asking not to cap the last 5 acres. On page 2, on the list of assignments, actually allowing was also on master plan community meetings, along with Markovich and Knopper. On page 3, just for clarity, under CIP, we were arranging an update on the current status, meaning 2014.
So what page are you on?
I'm on the top of page 3, the third bit down is CIPs.
Okay.
When it says arrange update on current status with Rob, it's meaning to let us know what's approved, what's going forward, not looking forward, because that's the ad hoc for next year, right?
Okay.
And then on Rastradero, I think I'm also assigned to that along with Rob, the low impact preserve designation.
Yeah.
And I think that was it.
Ed,
Oh,
under CIP, was I an alternate on that?
I think it was just Keith and myself
And then who
for
was,
the ad hoc.
and the community meetings, you said it was, there was a third, and I didn't catch that.
Ed's the third.
Ed, thank you.
Yep.
Are you done?
I think that's all in terms of actual corrections, yeah.
Any others? Yeah. Yeah, Commissioner Ashland.
On the first page, Ms. Kleinhouse's name is spelled two different ways, and neither of them are correct. And under oral communications, it's SHANNI instead of RI. And under number 4 for business, number 1, it's spelled SHIR. So they're both SHANI.
Any others? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. That brings us to our final item of business, ad hoc committee and liaison updates. Do any of the ad hoc committees or liaisons have updates?
It's only been 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know. Yes, Commissioner Chronic.
The ad hoc committee on exploring community gardens has met. We met last week, Commissioner Ashland and myself, and we laid out some goals and tasks to complete before we present to you next month. So we are, now convened.
Great. Yeah, oh. Yeah.
You're off again.
Yeah, threw me off there. One other item from the retreat on the I guess it's germane to ad hoc and liaison updates, is the subject of a Parks and Recreation outreach plan, communications plan. We talked about it at the retreat. We didn't sign an ad hoc committee to it. Basically, we're talking about consulting, Darren had suggested we consult with the city's PR person or communications director, I'm not sure what her title is, Claudia Keith, to come up with a plan for how we can better communicate with our constituents. And I would throw that out to see if there are people commissioners interested in being on an ad hoc for that, or if it's something that we should just manage between the chair and the vice chair. What are y'all thinking?
I mean, I'm happy to pace it if that's something that you'd like me to do. Okay. Get with Darren, so that's one option, but whatever anybody else wants.
The only other thing I was going to say is it might make sense to get her opinion on how to integrate that into the website, what we were talking about.
Definitely.
And so it just might be something that overlaps with that project.
I'm happy to be a backup if you need a second.
you'll take the lead on that. Great.
Okay.
Oh, I wanted to mention one other thing. This has to do with doing the EIR training. Is this the proper time, or should I bring that up later?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've done some outreach to various people that I know work on CEQA, and I now have a couple names of people to contact, so I'll be able to contact those people. I know we don't have a budget for this, as far as I know, and I think what I heard last time was just a couple of hours. Is that kind of, if we run some kind of training on CEQA and EIR, just the basics of reading those kinds of reports, do people want to, are we thinking on it like a 2-hour meeting on it? Can I get a little bit of feedback here?
I think that'd be great. I went to a really long one, and it was really too long.
Okay. Okay, so I'll kind of keep that in mind. And would we need the person to come to a meeting in the evening like this, or would we run a special meeting for that kind of thing?
My sense from the retreat was that not everyone was interested in doing the training, so maybe it makes sense to do it separate.
Okay, sounds
For those
good.
who are interested. Other comments and announcements? Do you have some, or should I go first?
I don't have a lot, actually. I wanted to mention the 7.7 acres, but you all were aware of that, either stayed last night or maybe watched a very interesting development, and that'll be a big deal for the commission and for the community, and a lot of eyes on that particular topic. So that's what I was going to mention. I'll say something about the golf course, because I'm sure you're interested in knowing what's happening there. I don't have a lot of information other than a little bit out of my hands. The city manager has met with Bruce Wolf, the executive officer of the Regional Water Board, and they had a productive meeting last week, Wednesday, in East Palo Alto, to talk about the flood control project and the need to move this along, and the golf course project. And so they had a few follow-up items that they're going to meet again next week to see if the permit application can be reconsidered. So we're all hoping that will be fruitful and that we can move forward. But that's as much as I know at this point.
I was going to make one announcement that ties right in with that, so
Go ahead.
I used the handy coupon that was given out to us to go play golf. I still have $9 in my pocket that I did not have to pay to the city for the privilege of playing golf, and chatted a little bit with the guys in the clubhouse, and they said that it's getting good uptake. I don't know if that's confirmed with your actual counting of the receipts, but people talk about it a lot. He's saying, the guys I was talking with, so it's still very low play.
It's low play, and the discounts are great, and the course is playing very well. So it's great to play at this point, but it's a challenge to market and promote the golf course when you don't know when we're going to close. So we've been saying we're closing May 1st, so we can't book any tournaments. And so if that gets delayed, it rolls on we delay a month, or it's very hard to market the golf course and be able to turn a profit. If we know we have an extra 3 months, we have an extra 6 months, we can work with that and put a marketing plan together. But if it's the unknown is the biggest challenge for us right now.
Yeah.
Is the water board giving us any idea what that deadline would be? Under what conditions would they change your mind?
Well, again, it's not related to the golf course and the golf course design. They're actually very happy for the most part with that. They're concerned about the flood control project specifically, and mostly concerned, I understand, regarding the Faber track, which is on the eastern side of the levee that runs toward the airport. And as the new channel receives a lot more water conveyance, that potentially can compromise the Faber track, which is an important property for the clapper rail and the salt marsh harvest mouse. And so their concern is, how can we, not we, but the flood control folks, make some adjustments to their design that would, either divert water in another way, or perhaps widen that part of the channel, which is not part of their design yet. You know what I mean? So where the bend occurs at the Friendship Bridge and then goes towards the airport, that stretch of the levee system is not changed much from what it is now. So one thing we are looking at is there a way we can make that channel wider and have the levee encroach further into the golf course? And there may be some possibilities there, given the way the course was designed. We had already set back quite a bit from the toe of the levee. So we think there's a possibility of doing that, at least from the golf course design point of view. So we're looking at that, and the JPA is looking at the value of doing that for water conveyance, and they're studying that and running some models, and we'll be sharing that with the water board. And so they're actively working on it at this point.
Is the ball in their court? We've given them all the information and they're just chewing on it, or are they?
Yeah, I mean, not entirely. We received a letter from the water board that didn't deny the golf course permit, but it was a letter of that the application was incomplete and they needed more information. So we're, and it's really Joe Teresi more than me, is working on responding to that letter. And there was 3 or 4 things in there, most of which were not a big deal and we can respond to. The biggest thing that we can't respond to easily is that they're concerned about the flood control project, and until they're satisfied with that design, they're concerned about approving the golf course permit because it may preclude changes to the levee project that could impact the golf course, you see. So that's one we can't really respond to unless we know more about what design elements they'd like to see changed. And at least we know a little more, maybe, that second part of the levee system is an interest of theirs to widen that channel. And if that's what it takes, I think we'll take a look at that.
Other comments and announcements?
I have some.
Commissioner Rechtel.
Okay. I talked to Darren about a few things before the meeting. I'll just give you a quick summary of what there was. The Baylands Boardwalk is closed. I think most of you have probably heard that. They have some money that they're studying what to do for the boardwalk. The boardwalk repair was a CIP that was cut this year. Originally it was in the final list and then was not funded. But they do have some money to study how would you do it. If you had money to build a boardwalk, how would you do it? Would you want to just repeat what we did before, change the design? That's the thing they're studying. So they'll study that this year, and then hopefully next year propose money to fix it, and so probably a couple years before the boardwalk is reopened. The second thing was a Rostadero. At the study session, or at the retreat, we talked about could you add picnic tables or benches out there. And so Darren looked at some of the issues, how big the parking lot is, how big the overflow parking lot is, the origin of the low impact park, and he put together a page, or actually 2 pages. He's going to mail it out to us, and we'll be able to take a look at that.
Great.
But it looked like there was some study group that said low impact park, and so it's unclear whether that's binding or whether it's just kind of a tradition. One last one, fire danger. Another CIP that was going to be funded this year but not was fire danger for Foothills Park. There's a lot of unburnt fuel up there, and if the fire did start, it could burn very hot. They've been reducing stuff, especially around the roads, so if there is a fire, people can evacuate. They still have some money left over from last year that they're working, and they will be working that. I think they're going to get to the park around April timeframe. So late fall, when you have the worst fires, at least we'll be able to get the people out of the park. But the other parts of the park, you could have severe fires if a fire started, but that's a known risk. And then also the ethics and the financial reporting. I finished my ethics, I'm proud to say. It took me 1 hour 45, which is 15 minutes too fast, so I had to do the penalty box and, and do the second round, but I did finish it. I'm not sure if other people still have it outstanding. That doesn't have a hard deadline, does it? The ethics?
April 1st.
That's, for the ethics is April 1st?
No, the
No, that's
form
for-
is
that's for
Form
the-
700.
the-
It doesn't have a hard,
I spoke to the city attorney last night, April 1st.
Wow.
Okay.
there you go.
Yeah, I think it says something about like 2 years since your last time. Well, I've never done it before, so does that mean I didn't have a deadline? But anyway, and then also the financial reporting is due April 1st.
Right.
Okay.
Is that it?
That's it.
I would just add that the Board of Education, I sent a notice out, discuss the Cubberley lease negotiations tonight, so we'll see what comes out of that. I did submit comments. If you all are interested in seeing them, I'm happy to send them around. The main library.
Yes, please.
Okay. The main library also there was a council discussion about the new main library naming that's been going around, and I don't know how that came out. Do you know how that came out? They wanted to name it Rinconada.
I know it's been on the agenda at council, and I think that because of the hour, it got postponed to another date. That's what I believe happened, but
Okay.
I'll find out to confirm. But I think the interest of staff and of the Library Commission is to rename the main library Rinconada Library. Is the recommendation.
I think that's so confusing. Oh, my
It's a
goodness.
main library, leave it alone.
And finally, the comp plan, the council is, at staff's recommendation, is revisiting the entire process for developing the comp plan. And part of that is going to include some kind of citizens advisory committee, I think, with some commission representation, but they're coming back, they're still considering what the makeup of that group would be. And the process would entail quite a bit more public outreach and engagement to inform the planning process. So that'll be ongoing for the next couple of years, and I'm sure we will want to have a role in it some way.
And one last thing,
Yep.
Scott Park was approved by the council 8 days ago. So start your training for bocce. And I'm not sure when they start the construction.
You're coaching, aren't you?
Yes. But it's good to get that over with. We had plenty of meetings about that.
Yeah. All right. That brings us to tentative agenda for April 22nd. I think it's looking kind of long.
I think there's going to be plenty of things to talk about. Yeah, so the Urban Forest Master Plan will come back. Claudia Keith is the Chief Communications Officer we talked about before. She's been visiting commissions around this Our Palo Alto values discussion, and so I thought we'd have her come in April to talk about that, present that, and hear commission feedback. I think there is 2 park items coming back as well, Monroe Park and Hopkins, which I believe will be ready next month. And I believe so, yeah.
Monroe Park, and what was the other one?
Hopkins. And so they're the 4 that I had. Magical Bridge, right, right.
Community garden.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, community gardens we're going to report.
Okay.
you're going to report next month. So, community gardens.
And the master plan will likely be a standing item on most agendas.
Yeah.
So precisely what, will be ready for next month, we'll have to see, but likely something.
Also, the dog.
Okay. It's a lot.
Which I think is enough.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's what all that waving was about. Who is that girl? All right, I think that's it for the agenda. Anybody want to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
We're adjourned.